Hey, everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Mike Gibb. I run accountsrecovery.net, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar on the topic here. There it is, addressing the ambiguity of compliance and conversational AI in the collection industry. Wanted to make sure I got that right. Are you grappling with the complexities of implementing conversational AI while staying inside the strict boundaries of debt collection regulations? Rather than bury your head in the sand until it's too late, you can elevate your collection strategies and stay ahead in the rapidly evolving debt collection landscape. Today, in this webinar, which is being sponsored by Skit.ai, we've got a panel of experts here to share crucial insights into how you can seamlessly integrate these advanced technologies and talk about best practices and real-world examples to help ensure your AI tools enhance both efficiency and compliance. As I mentioned, this webinar is being sponsored by Skit.ai. Skit.ai is the accounts and receivables industry's leading conversational voice AI company, enabling collection agencies to streamline and accelerate revenue recovery. Skit.ai's compliance, configurable, and easy-to-deploy solution enables businesses to automate nearly 1 million weekly consumer conversations. The company's been awarded several recognitions, including Disruptive Technology of the Year 2022 by CCW, a Stevie Bronze winner in 2022 by the International Business Awards, and Startup of the Year in Artificial Intelligence in 2021 by Entrepreneur India. Skit.ai is headquartered in New York City, and you can obviously learn more by visiting them online at skit.ai. I'll drop a link in the chat that you can use to visit their website as well. Let me introduce you now to our panelists. Pratik Gupta is director at Skit.ai. He has worked solely on U.S. debt collection understanding compliance and baking them into Skit's product offering and exploring growth opportunities. Yes. David Kaminsky is the chair of the financial services law practice at Carlson & Messer in Los Angeles. He represents debt collectors, banks, other creditors, and asset buyers in the defense of all claims brought under federal and state consumer protection and related statutes. He manages the nationwide litigation for numerous financial institutions and has helped shape the law affecting the rights of creditors and the accounts receivable management industry throughout the United States. David provides compliance and training advice and develops policies and procedures for ARM industry. He was an ACA International Foundation Fellow Award recipient, the ACA Attorney of the Year, chair of the ACA International Attorneys Division, and is the current chair of ACA's Judicial Committee. He's also an award-winning attorney who has received accolades from numerous financial services trade organizations throughout the United States. Michael Lamb is a founding partner of Corporate Advisory Solutions, a respected and fast-growing merchant bank that supports a select group of clients with offices in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. Michael and his team have completed more than 100 M&A engagements in the ARM industry, and he leads his deal team on M&A engagements, compliance and regulatory assessments, valuation, and expert witness litigation matters, while also charting the firm's corporate direction and strategic growth plan. Everybody who's watching us live today is absolutely invited to ask questions and submit comments during the course of our conversation. You can use the chat or the Q&A, whichever you prefer. Although if you wish to remain anonymous, the Q&A is going to be your best bet. There is an anonymous button that you can push, and anything that you send to us is sent anonymously. Since we have an attorney on our panel, let me read the following disclaimer. This presentation is not intended to be legal advice and may not be used as legal advice. Legal advice must be tailored to the specific circumstances of each case. Every effort has been made to ensure this information is up to date. It is not intended to be a full and exhaustive explanation of the law in any area and should never be used to replace the advice of your own legal counsel. All right, let's jump into our conversation. So let's talk a little bit first about the upside. What are the benefits of using conversational AI in collections? Michael Lamb, you logged on first today. So you know what? Instead of picking the guy who logged on last, we're going to go with first today. So you're first. I'm going to ask you to start us off.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Mike, and for Skit.ai and David for joining the webinar today. I would tell you, I think the overall benefits, right, is in the world that we're in with the 25 to 35 year old folks that are so used to living in a tech-oriented environment and wanting to have instant interaction, whether it's via their phone, chat. I think there's no doubt in my mind that that's where the conversational AI component comes into play, because if it wasn't needed or wanted, it wouldn't exist. And I do see this world of how we interact with the consumers and also small to medium-sized businesses changing with the advent of all of these new technologies that are coming out to the market. And I feel like our industry tends to lag a bit from other markets like the call center space, but it's beginning to kind of be more willing to adopt some of these newer technologies than they were 5 to 10 years ago. And I think a lot of that has to do with regulation and the compliance environment. It's opening the door for them. So I do feel like there's going to be a real need. And as this world becomes more mature, you're going to see even more opportunities here to gain efficiencies in your workflows.
Right. I think there's two aspects to it, Michael. Like one you mentioned is definitely the aspect of consumers wanting it already. There's we've done some research, and what we've figured that some of the consumers, especially when we're talking about debt collection, they don't like to be judged by humans especially when they're talking to a live person. Talking to a technology definitely helps in that regard. But at a very high level, from an agency's point of view, that's the second angle that we need to explore here. At a high level, it helps you reduce costs. It helps you increase efficiency, increase penetration, offer more self-serve options to debtors, 24/7 availability, all of which improves your probability of collections. Goes on to help you do more business. Use this capability across all your channels, voice, SMS, email, web chat, and you suddenly become less and less dependent on your live agents to grow your business. AI at large, I believe, does what it is told to do consistently day in and day out, and that's where the compliance piece comes in, Michael, that you're talking about. There's no bad days, there's no mistakes. Which makes the conversations more compliant. There is obviously some edge cases there of hallucinations, but we can talk about more on that because there's very elegant ways of handling some of those limitations. But yeah, that's where I believe conversational AI is headed.
I think that was very well said when you said there are numerous elegant ways of handling the conversation. This industry has been afraid of AI, I think, for a long time. And I think it's mainly because they were concerned about, well, what are the laws surrounding AI? What do they look like? And what do I have to be worried about that I wasn't worried about before? Well, in a way, the same laws that you've been dealing with for years and years and years, at least on the TCPA front, are still present, even with AI. Because remember, the TCPA says it is illegal to make a call using an auto dialer to a cell phone without prior express consent, or, it's got the or in there, to leave an artificial or pre-recorded message on a cell phone without prior express consent. That law, interestingly enough, was around since 1991. So even back in 1991, I guess, those who were drafting this, the TCPA, had the foresight to realize that, well, technology is emerging. They've heard artificial voices before. I think even back then you could insert an artificial voice as far back as in 1991 into a recorder. They go, "Hi, this is," and then you would hear Jenny, and you would know that it's a artificial voice. But we've had that for years and years and years, and I think because of that, they implemented that. So that's part of getting consent, right? So many of you are on this phone call today, I believe, are so used to getting consent. You built a strategy to get consent because you were so TCPA focused for years and years and years and years. And even though back in 2021, you saw that magic case called Facebook come out, where Facebook versus DeGuide said, hey, we're going to interpret what this auto dialer thing means once and for all so we can have some kind of clarity, because the FCC had previously ruled that those predictive dialers and all those auto dialer or automated dialing systems that you're using, they all violate the TCPA. They're all auto dialers under the law. Not so fast, bucko. The things have changed, and Facebook basically said, look, if in order to have an auto dialer, when you're making a call or texting, you have to be using random and sequential number generation capability. You've got to either store your numbers via a random and sequential number generator, or you have to generate your numbers via a random and sequential number generator. And I'll just tell you from my experience, I'm not saying this across the board. So don't take it as the bastion of advice here, and this is not legal advice, but I have yet to see a vendor that I've worked with or that my clients have worked with in this industry, and I defend the industry in litigation throughout the United States. I do compliance work and training with clients throughout the United States. So I've seen it from all different perspectives, from all different type of clients and from all type of federal courts and then the regulators. I've been before pretty much most of the biggest regulators throughout the United States in various states and all the federal regulators. And I can tell you this, that just in dealing with that perspective that it gives me to see what's going on. Once this DeGuide case came out, I can tell you that I have not yet seen a company that I've come in contact with that is using random and sequential number generation capability in their dialing systems, in their pre-recorded messages. Sorry, not in the pre-recorded message, but in their dialing or their texting systems. Remember, when you're dealing with pre-recorded messages, artificial messages, we're going to get into AI messages pursuant to the FCC's recent February 8th, 2024 ruling. Those are separate from the text message and the calls. Those, for you to need prior express consent, you need to be using an auto dialer when calling a cell phone, right? You need to use an auto dialer to call a cell phone or text when you're using an auto dial process, a random and sequential number generator process. But if you're not, many companies say, hey, I'm calling, I'm texting, I'm not using an auto dialer, I don't need consent. On the pre-recorded message side, on the direct drop voice side, on the VoAP side, you do need that. So many different things to think about. We're going to have an ongoing dialogue about this, but just remember, since 1991, this is the good news for all of you. 1991, the case law and the FCC said when someone voluntarily provides you their telephone number without instructions to the contrary, they provide you their cell phone number, that mere provision gives you the right to, one, call via auto dialers, text via auto dialers, and leave pre-recorded or artificial voice messages just by the mere giving of that. And I know a lot of you your mouth is agog and you're aghast, but that's what the law says. More on that later.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you're raising, David. So if someone has already voluntarily given their phone number without instructions to the contrary, that just leaves out probably skip trace numbers which can be in question. But other than that, everything falls under the purview of legal calling using within the TCPA purview, right?
That's a very good point.
Okay, so that sort of segues into my next question, where we talked about the benefits. Let's talk about the risks that are associated with deploying conversational AI and debt collection. David, obviously, you kind of started down that road, so I'll let you kick us off. And what do people sort of need to be aware of, as they seek to try and use this technology or optimize or maximize the use of the technology in their operation?
Good point, Mike. Again, since 1991, you've had the word artificial that was already built in the TCPA. So if you're leaving an artificial or pre-recorded message when contacting a cell phone, you would need prior express consent. And Pratik and I and Michael were speaking earlier, and we were just discussing the February 8th, 2024 ruling by the FCC that really came about it was going to come about, but it came about even faster because of that fake Biden voicemail messages where he said, I'm dropping out of the campaign, or whatever he said. I'm not running for president. And people heard that AI voice that simulated his voice, and of course it was a scam. That is now because of the FCC's ruling, that invokes criminal liability. But aside from that, the FCC said the use of artificial voice, let's just be clear, is going to be deemed a pre-recorded or artificial voice message. It falls under that bracket of the TCPA. And we're not going to wait for public comment. We're not going to put it out for public comment. We're not going to, bandy this about for about 6 months to 5 years. It is the law now. So that FCC ruling is in place right now. But it was really, I think, to many people, when I got a couple calls and people said, oh my God, did you see that ruling? And they go, oh, you know what? It's no big deal. That's how we've been abiding by everything for years. I told clients, hey, if you're using, artificial intelligence, or something called soundboard, which many of you may know is a process where someone could call in, a consumer can call in, and then the agent doesn't talk live, but presses a series of buttons that have pre-recorded responses to the questions that are being made. That soundboard was deemed by the FCC 3 or 4 years ago to be an artificial or pre-recorded voice. So no surprise that AI came in there. So again, if you're probably using AI, strongly consider that you need to have prior express consent to use that. Pratik, what are your thoughts on that?
I think definitely you touched upon the February FCC ruling. In my view, I think we've always had that limitation to use a technology like an ATDS or pre-recorded message or text message using ATDS or artificial voice to have some sort of prior express consent. And one of those things could be just the consumer giving out voluntary giving out their phone number to inviting them to be contacted. But given the consent, I don't think a lot has changed since the ruling, or because of the ruling, because the ruling just clarifies pretty much that the artificial voices that we use today is also considered artificial voice within the TCPA purview. I think there were some arguments going around that which had some merit before the ruling, was that the kind of artificial voice that exists today, the technology that we use today, the deep learning algorithms that we use today to generate those voices are very different from what TCPA intended back in 1991, which was very similar to the soundboard technology that you mentioned. And some other forms of text to speech, which were again very different from what we use today. But this ruling just clarifies that this is also another form of artificial voice. But if you have consent, especially on the outbound side, there's not much that changes. But then there are applications on the other side as well, which is on the inbound side, which does not get impacted at all. So that can still continue to happen. I think beyond the TCPA, there's another FDCPA kind of a risk as well, which where the technology can go off script, so to say, because now with generative AI, the bots are not super controlled. They're not really scripted. They are allowed to roam a little bit freely within the defined guardrails. But the elegant ways that I was talking about earlier, those are to how do you define those guardrails very, very strongly? How do you keep the bot keep the fluidity of the conversation, keep it natural, keep it human-like, and still keep it within a contained pool that you can talk about anything and everything within this within these guardrails. So those guardrails are the ways to control it, but that's definitely a risk.
But Pratik, here's I guess my question though, as you think about just the business model, and I think a lot of people understand the legality of where things are, but how do you police it? How, from an operational perspective, do you, or does a company that's utilizing a service like this put a wrapper around it to protect themselves from it going off script? is there a way to protect it?
Yep. So
Great
that
question.
is that's actually a great question, right? One way to handle it, and what's at Skit, what we've done is we've made some sort of a maker checker model, where just like I was explaining, the large language model still has the flexibility to keep the conversation fluid, but every output that it delivers is checked by another very light sort of AI model, which keeps it in check that you are within the guardrails. If there is a non-compliant answer that a non-acceptable FDCPA comment that the large language model or generative AI wants to give out, that is what is checked by another light AI model, so to say. So that maker checker model keeps the bot in check. Generative AI still keeps it fluid and flexible. And of course, then there are post-call analysis that you can always do, right? While all of these will take you to a 99+% compliance levels, but how do you learn? How do you improve still? Right. So then there are heavier AI models which kind of check post call that did anything non-compliant happen on this call. You learn from those and kind of deploy it within the system to make sure that never happens again.
Mike, can I ask Mike Lamb a question?
Yeah.
Mike Lamb, so interesting in your world, in the M&A world, when you're bringing companies together, do you see a tension between certain companies that say, we want to take over your company, we want to merge with you, whatever it's going to be, whatever that business model is going to look like going forward, and you're here with your technology, we're here, and do you see like a tension that just hits a roadblock where they're saying, no, we're not touching the texting, we're not touching the AI, we're not touching this, we're just this, but yet company B was saying, oh, no, we need to take you into the 21st century and we need to move this forward because we want to be more efficient, more effective, we want less employees, et cetera, et cetera. We're in the world of, as I said, that we're in the world of some of the most heavily regulated, regulated climate that Mike Gibb I've ever seen before. I mean, remember what George Bush said? He said, I was never meant to be the quote deregulation president. I didn't mean to be that. I just had a Congress that pushed me that way, and my hands, he said, were tied. And whatever the truth of that is, I'm just saying, but now that we've shifted from a lightly regulated climate to then here we are from 2008, now we're in 2024, and we are just regulated to the hill like we've never seen before, causing companies to rethink all of their business models. Michael, how do you deal with all that?
Yeah, David, it's a great question. I mean, in our world, when we're dealing with companies that are on legacy technology and then somebody's implementing AI and looking at the entire world completely different than the other company, sometimes it's a big pill for the selling company to absorb, because they're saying, wait, you're going to take what I've built, my clients, that I've done it the right way, I've followed all the rules and all the guidelines the best of my ability, and now we're adding this whole new AI component to the business. It's kind of like taking a business and putting it on steroids with technology, and a lot of it's so new in a lot of cases, at least for this industry, getting people comfortable with the legitimacy of them, that they're not going to end up in major legal hot water, David, where they're going to be sued out the wazoo, is a real dynamic. And that's where I think you've got that, that new and old view of the world. And eventually there'll be a meet in the middle, right, on what's appropriate and what's not when it comes to coming together. But it's a real issue that's out there in every discussion we're having with a merger or an acquisition when it comes to the technology stack that the company's got.
Yeah, I could imagine that tension. And you have the old, and it's interesting, you said the word, I think you said legacy technology, and that's a great point that you made there, Michael, because the audience and those who are attending, always think about what is the legacy technology that you're using? Where is it? Where are you in that legacy technology? And is it so old that maybe you should consider having, from a compliance standpoint, having your IT personnel or maybe an outside vendor re-vet that legacy technology so that you don't have any legacy. And I've literally seen this happen in a lawsuit, in a class action, where there was legacy technology that someone said, we don't have that. We don't have these random and sequential, whatever, number generators. We're not using auto dialers. We're good to go. And all of a sudden they have the opposing counsel's expert, who was fairly brilliant, unfortunately, come in, vet the system and say, hey, you got this legacy software that has random and sequential number generation technology sitting in your platform, and you have a protocol not to get consent because you're, quote, not using an auto dialer. Guess what? You are. Or as they said from the movie Yar, Blanche, you are. So
Yeah, I mean, but I think for the critique and for companies like yours and others, I feel like there's a lot of education that continues, like these webinars, right? For people to understand how it gets implemented in the workflow and how they can be protected as best they can in utilizing it despite the compliance and regulatory concerns. I think that's going to be the key, especially for the small to mid-sized company that's in this industry that has grown up differently than some of the larger ones that have investment backing, etc.
I think someone, David, in the web chat has also asked a good question that, how can I monitor the bot in near or real time? And Michael, this goes on to add on to your point. It's in some ways our companies like ours responsibility to keep it very, very transparent and open, right? The maker checker model that I was talking about, there are, we do release once everything goes on LLM. We will be releasing real-time reports on, so what happens is the call happens. There's real-time feedback that the LLM gets, but then post-call there is a much more in-depth analysis where the call was compliant or not, and the calls are scored on that. The scoring should be made available to customers very transparently. Today, we did 99.95% compliance calls, right? There were a couple of calls where these things happened. This is what we're doing to fix it. No technology will be 100% always accurate. Either you dumb it down or if you dumb it down, it will always be 100% accurate. You script it out, you say you do this after you do this, you do this after you do this, and it will be 100% compliant. But then it will not be as effective. You want to make it as very, very effective. There will be, you'll leave some room for improvement. But that has to be very, very transparently and clearly communicated. So I think the responsibility is on the tech companies to make sure that the customers really understand what they're dealing with, and giving them all the monitoring tools to make sure they know where the performance is at.
Pratik, I have another question for you. Pratik, could you just explain to those here, and I'm not asking for anything proprietary or your internal collection or any of your programming or your coding, but I would like to say, just tell us at high level, how does your system work? How does it differentiate from Soundboard, which is the agent pressing a already pre-planned, pre-recorded response to the question? How does your AI work? Give us an example.
So the AI is there two. Let's look at the Gen 1 AI, which is it's been in production for the last couple of years. Then there's this Gen 2, which is coming out very, very soon. The Gen 1 was very similar to a scripted bot that I spoke about. What we had done is we had imagined, tens of thousands of combination that, this is how the conversation could flow. You reach a certain point in the conversation, there are 10 different ways in which you can go, right? So that it forms a very complex sort of a decision tree, but it's a very complex tree. It's not a simple complex tree. So that is why it was still, a technology that, and that decision tree is very similar to how you would say, you would train a live agent. If you are at this point, these are the things that you can do. If the user responds in this particular manner, this is what you need to do. But those are still scripted. I could still control, every single word that the bot was saying. While there are, tens of thousands of prompts, but they're still written down. Cut to Gen 2, the generative AI piece. The way it works is there's a large language model that is sitting behind the technology. And the way to control it is to give it goals that it needs to achieve, which are in form of instructions, so to say. Right, and there are various open source models that are out there in the market. I can name a few if people are interested, but there's several open source models that are out there in the market, and we keep trying what is the most receptive at the moment, what is working best, which is what we want to give it out to our customers as well. What needs to be understood is that these models, while they're open source, they still need to be tamed to talk about collections and collections only, and be very, very compliant with conversationally be very compliant with FDCPA. And then there are, two other different layers of compliance, which is reachability. Right? I mean, how do you make sure that you're calling a person today, the person answers, and you're not texting them the next day? Are you waiting to for the next 6 days to text them? Or if they responded on email, you're not calling them back without consent, etc. Right? So there's there's that layer of compliance as well that comes into the picture, which needs to be controlled. But answering your question, how does it work? It's an open source language model which is already trained. We drive those instructions to a level of clarity that it does never go out of the debt collection realm.
Okay.
Then there are different constraints in terms of reachability and what can you talk about, what can you not talk about in terms of instructions. One of the risks that I personally see with generative AI in general is data privacy. What this does, the approach that we've taken, what that does is it does not use any of the data that, or any of the, especially the PII data that we get from our customers about the consumers. So data is completely intact. No data is being used to kind of train the models, tune the models, etc. The training, tuning, etc. is basically happening on the monitoring.
Pratik, Michael Lamb and I were talking about this, when we were just sort of banding about things with each other. And so we'd like to ask you, let's just say you're in the middle of a debt collection conversation with someone, and then the consumer goes completely off script and says, on Saturday night, I'm going to have a fried chicken dinner and then go out for a beer. How in the world does can your AI, can they accommodate that and understand that? Because I think a lot of fear in the industry, Michael and I were talking about, is this. It's not that the industry doesn't want to embrace the technology, they're just afraid of it, because they're afraid that if a consumer says something, it takes let's say the AI off the rails, then the consumer goes, I'm out of here, boom, and you've lost maybe that consumer, forever, possibly. So in other words, you get them and you have that, you got them in your hands and you don't want to lose them. So if you could sort of address that, Pratik.
Yeah, so there's this concept called out of scope for whenever you define a technology, there's something which is always going to be out of scope. the way the technology works is that anytime the consumer tries to push the technology out of scope, it tries to bring it back. While it will still understand that you're trying to talk about a Saturday night plan, it knows that you're talking about a Saturday night plan, but it will try to bring it back, right? It will not indulge in that conversation and not ask you more questions about, okay, which pizza are you going to order, or what kind of beers you like, right? Instead, I understand that you have very interesting plans on Saturday night, but can we close this conversation first?
So
So
Pratik, even if, let's say I was being a consumer and I'm trying to trick the system and I say, yes, I'd like to pay my debt next week with a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't know why I'm on fried chicken, but I love fried chicken. So, and a bucket of fried chicken, even something that subtle, can it veer you back?
oh yeah, because it is expecting an answer in terms of a dollar amount.
Okay.
And when it does not get that, it knows that it's a commodity. So basically the models to the way they work today, they understand everything that you and I speak about.
Okay.
Right. So they have that capability to figure out that this is not, I'm requesting for money and this guy is not offering me money, unless you instruct the bot that a barter system works. It will not accept anything but money.
And the quality of the sound?
Those are evolving. Again, there are new voices that keep coming up every now and then. I think there's enough already in the market. It's just about, how much can you integrate with your systems, whether that's a priority or not, whether it really results in whether it makes any difference in the results or not. While there are way too many options out there for everything that you want to do, but does that have a lot of utility? Maybe you have a male voice and a female voice, a couple of different accents that should take care of. All research suggests that it should take care of everything. But the finer things, it's just that a lot of tech debt that goes into it to bring more and more voices onto the platform.
Pratik, how about for Spanish speaking or other languages? How have you been tackling that?
So it can be done. Spanish, again, the language models are different for different languages, but it can be handled. Basic understandings of, this is not English and this is a different language. Detecting that this is Spanish and switching to a different model is something that the models are capable of. While we've not done a lot of deployment or development in Spanish because, again, business case needs to be justified. What we've typically seen is that 10 to 15% is at most what people are seeing in terms of volumes coming into their platforms or into their systems. For 10-15%, it does not make sense to put in the same amount of effort as you do for the other 85-90%.
Makes sense.
Pratik, I get some AI calls, and normally, they're scam calls, of course, and our reaction is just to hang up. But I want to test them because I want to see how good the AI is getting. So I got a call recently from a mortgage lender, and the mortgage lender, she goes, "Hi, I see that you're looking for a loan. How can we help you today?" And of course, I didn't call for anything, but they called me. And I said, "Well, I'm going Saturday night to a Dodger game and I'm going to have a Dodger dog." And she goes, "Great. How can we start you with that application?" And I'm thinking to myself, is your AI that bad in 2024 that, here we are, but that's how some of the AI is, I guess, with these scam companies that really don't care because they're using the worst of the worst and just hopefully that they're going to get someone who answers in that standard protocol way. But it was so bad it couldn't even get me. And she laughed. She goes, "That's great. Let's get started." And but I take it that your platform is much more.
David, I'll go the other way. I've had a couple of really good kind of inbound calls where I I didn't know
Really?
that I was on the phone. I was like, I figured it out after the first 20 seconds, but initially I thought it was a real human being.
Okay.
And that's the real
And it
problem.
was, and
Today,
I was like, it was somebody that it was a robot selling health insurance. I mean, Claire was great. I mean, I thought Claire was real. And then I realized I was like, this is a robot. But that was my next question for Pratik, which is like, when you give data back to the agency, right, on the call transcripts and the log, how is it really capturing kind of the intent of the call from what you're seeing and hearing from the discussion, or if they're able to make payment or whatever ends up happening? I know I've gotten a bunch of those questions from people in the space about that component for quality assurance purposes.
right? So there are again standard tools which, and we don't tend to reinvent the wheel all the time. If there is something out there in the market, we don't mind using it. There are standard tools which can help you summarize any conversation. You give it the script of this call, it will summarize in, let's say,
Sure.
paragraph, 5 sentences, 10 sentences, whatever, right? You give it that instruction, it can do that. And that's very similar to what we do today as well. While we have, there are two ways we do it. One is give a quick summary of in a free flowing sentence that this is what happened on the call. And the second one, more graphic, is achievement of milestones. Any collection call, for example, goes from whether the user picked up the phone or not, whether it was the right user or not, whether the user authenticated themselves or not, and then whether they gave a promise to pay or not, or some of the other dispositions in terms of whether they disputed the debt, etc., etc., and then eventually whether they made the payment or not. So let's say there are these five or six different milestones. If at the end of the day, the agency just wants to know what milestone did this person reach at a very high level. And more often than not, you're comfortable just knowing that, this person made a promise to pay for a certain amount. Now, you're not super interested in what went on in that conversation. As an outcome, that's what you need. But when you are doing an audit, whether the technology is working correctly or accurately or not, you would want to go one level deeper and figure out, read a few summaries. Where if that is something that you're not satisfied with, you might want to go and listen to or read the entire transcript. So all three levels of transcripts or things that you share with the customer is available.
David, what's your view on that from the compliance side? I mean, clients require certain things. The creditors are going to say to them, look, we need this following information captured. You may need this for internal, but we need X, X, and X.
That's sometimes the struggle. As long as you're able to, when we're looking at things, we're thinking, and this is the way I look at it, and it's sort of a distorted way to look at it, but you have to, in my position, you have to look at something from the perspective of what Pratik's doing for the clients. Am I going to have the evidence that I need, that I can show that this conversation went this way and this occurred on the call, right? And of course, Pratik, what is a system that you use? It is a recording system, or it's just a chat capture?
We have our own internal recorders, which record the conversation, record the transcripts. So that's level one, like I said, right? And then there is a summary level on top of it, and then there is a milestone level on top of it. So but these are all internally built. The summarizer, I think, is external, but everything else is in-house.
Got it. And okay. And let me ask you, look, if you have the recording, you can have that, translated at any time. you know, as long as there is a documentation of what went on during that call, you're giving me the evidence and the tools to say this did not happen during the call, and it's pretty straightforward. It's just like having your regular recordings, right?
The recordings are also available. I mean,
Right.
you listen to the entire call as to what transpired.
Right.
It's available for up to
And,
5
and
years.
that and that's the key. You know, I remember telling back in 2010 when I was advocating to the industry to recording, people thought I was crazy because you said, oh my God, you're going to be telling companies to capture that which they could use to then for consumers to take and the consumer attorneys to take and start a class action. I said, nah, not so much. Yes, once in a blue moon. Mostly they're going to be one-offs, but 94% of the time, they're going to help you defend a case from those ridiculous he said, she said's.
Yeah,
And Pratik, of course, you're saying that your system is accurate. Could Pratik tell us this? Forget about the cost saving. And I think everybody who is attending sort of gets that there's a cost saving built in. And but is there some kind of what is another benefit of why AI is better than the agent on the phone?
I think it's when we talk about dependence on agents, it's not just cost. While cost is one angle,
Right, of
definitely, but
course.
when it's dependence on agents, it's also about you see fluctuations in your call volumes. Tax season comes and your volumes are higher. You want to dial out to more people. You need more bodies at that point in time. With technology, you don't. You know, any sort of fluctuation, scale up, scale down, all you need to do is, have those minutes in your credits, and that's it. You, that's like buying telephone minutes, right? Which you could use throughout the year, and then the fluctuations are taken care of. Then, again, on the inbound side, I think a consumer they would still call you in off business hours if they had a chance, because during business hours everyone is at their own business, uh, right? So if you gave them a chance to call them on weekends, if you publicized it well that you can call me after office and still get your job done, why would people not do that? And that's not happening today because they know the office hours are 9 to 6. Nobody's available after that. So the whole dependence on humans is, while cost is definitely a big factor, but there are way too many other advantages as well. Humans always have good days, bad days. You might forget to read the mini Miranda on 20% of the calls one day. Exposes you. I'm not saying that will always lead to a lawsuit, but does expose you.
Hey, David, where do you see, like, if you think about kind of the AI movement, where do you see future legal issues that are going to pop up that may not have, that haven't, I'm not asking for a list of every case that you think is going to show up here, but where do you think the lawsuits are going to start coming up? If you were to predict, and I'm not going to hold you to it.
Right.
So
And
my
that was one of Mike Gibbs' very good questions. He was looking for, like, where is the regulation going and where does this go? On the AI side, again, as Pratik said, you're going to have a gentle, kind, as he said, an elegant way of handling things with consumers. You're not going to get those calls that I hear, according to Pratik, where you have that escalation where someone says something. Even I've heard a consumer say something that was sort of generic and mild, such as, I hear what you're saying about this debt. It's a lot of money. I could get an attorney and save myself a lot of money, but I'm willing to. And the debt collector who wanted to get on their high horse that moment said, "Oh, did you just say attorney?" He goes, "Yeah, I don't have an attorney, but I'm saying I could maybe get one, and maybe this would, I could compromise. But I'm willing." He goes, "Oh no, shut up, sir." He goes, "We're not dealing with you today." And where that debt collector could have had a $27,000 recovery, he literally took it off the rails just because he wanted to be a martyr and a big shot. and dumb down the consumer to where the consumer was trying to get the collector to stop, and he had to one point to say, "Shut up," and then the collector said, "Did you just say what I think you said?" And it just evolved into absolute madness. But you're not going to have that with AI. So I see that as a benefit, that you're going to have, as Pratik said, an elegant, kind, humane way of talking, even if the consumer is off the rails, right? It's always going to be the AI is always going to be looking good, right? Pratik, it never raises its voice, right?
Absolutely. And there will be chances, when the consumer is trying to really take it off the rails, and the AI will just hand it over to a human agent. Again, the point is
Is
not to
that
No.
seamless, Pratik, the way that happens? I mean, is it like, in other words, the consumer's like the agent's ready to go, and it's just like a split second transfer, right?
It's it's a second or two transfer. But it's fairly seamless. It's like if I was talking to a contact center agent and they wanted to escalate it to someone because they did not know the answer, the philosophy
Right.
is very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think Michael, you raised a interesting question. Where do we see this could go bad, right? And my sense is the moment we start misusing it is where we see problems. While technically I could blast out maybe 100,000 calls a minute right now, but do I really need to do that? Do I need to call every single consumer every other hour to collect on that debt?
Yeah.
No, right? I mean, you respect the limitations of the FDCPA, and it helps you with every other thing as well. Right. So that's what I believe. And for example, first party collections, maybe some of those limitations are not really valid. But we've seen a lot of our customers follow those regulations to the T because they follow a very similar philosophy. Now, sometimes that's not required, and you do breach it a little bit, but then you don't overdo it. You don't call me 25 times a day. If I didn't have the money 2 hours ago, I will not have the money right now as well. So
No, Pratik, I guess my question is, are we going to start to see, how we used to see signs, David, along the highway? If a debt collector called you, call me. Are we going to see, did a robot try to call to collect debt from you, call me? Are we going to see it?
You know what? We may get a claim that, depending on the quality of the AI again, the AI completely misinterpreted what my client said, and my client was willing to pay, and the AI thought that, "Oh, you want to set up a payment plan in 5 weeks? Thank you so much, sir. We'll call you then." Click. No, that's not what happened. Misrepresented. What happened?
Right.
Okay. Then the consumer's gonna have to say, "This just happened on the phone call, and I suffered harm, so I have a legitimate FDCPA claim that I could have standing to bring into court because it's not just they misrepresented, but I was harmed because I lost the opportunity at that moment to make the deal when I wanted to, because that's the only time that I had in that whole week, and now I lost it because they misinterpreted what I said. It's a fault of their program. They misconstrued what I said." And that could happen, Michael, that very well could happen.
that could happen. Misunderstandings happen, right? And that's why I never said 100%.
Right.
There will be this small percent, but that's true for human ears as well. Sometimes sometimes what you just I didn't fully get your question. So that's how it works. Language is a difficult thing to handle sometimes.
A couple of questions here. Maybe we can take them before we wrap up. Does your system allow a debtor or customer at any time or ability to opt out to a live agent? Does it allow for follow-up, and does it retain previous conversations? Does it disclose that it's a digital agent?
Yep. So I'll start with the digital agent first. Every conversation, and I wanted to mention that when Michael was talking about his experience as well, every single conversation, irrespective of how good the voice is, starts with that this is a digital agent. We don't want to fool customers. We don't want, and then that's at the end of the day, if the customer, if a debt collection agency wants to avoid that, avoid saying that, we can facilitate that. But our recommendation always is to start off saying that this is a digital collection agent. You want to be, again, in the interest of transparency that we maintain with our customers, we want to make sure that it passes on as well.
And Pratik, are there different ways of saying that in the introduction? You know,
you could choose your own classical way, but you know,
like
we
what
have
words do you traditionally hear?
typically what we've seen is that there would be a typical name given to the bot. You know, this is Dotty calling from some collection agency. You know, I'm a digital collection agent here to help you with settling this account, or something like that, right?
Okay, I didn't know if there were certain words that do and do just from experience do and do not turn off a consumer.
Oh yeah, so those are things that we keep experimenting with while we have some understanding, but I'll not claim that we for sure know that these words work and these words don't. There's some context in which they work and some context in which they don't, but there's always testing that's going on. You know, we do live testings with our customers as well, which kind of helps us get better every day, so to say. But Mike, I believe there was another question.
Yeah, there's about bots. I see.
Yeah. Are the AI bots working real time on a
Yeah.
company's proprietary system? How would the call transcripts be communicated to a user company?
Sorry,
Yeah, so they said, are the AI bots working real time on a company's proprietary system? In other words, they're constant, those AI bots. And that's part one.
They are working on our proprietary systems. There is some open source models that we use, but then there is a you know, proprietary layer of technology. Either it is in terms of setting the goals, making sure that they are or you know, not the goals, but let's say the guardrails, making sure that they are tight. Maybe there is you know, then there is a layer of compliance, etc., that gets built on top of it, which makes it a holistic solution for which is usable for the debt collection space.
Got it. Well said.
Well, we're unfortunately out of time, so we'll have to wrap things up. But Michael, David, Pratik, I want to thank each of you so much for being here on behalf of everybody who's watching and listening and walking away with a much better understanding of conversational AI and its place in the collections industry. And I think clearing up a lot of the ambiguity. Thank you so much to each of you for sharing your insights and your expertise with everybody today. Pratik, I want to thank you and the team at Skit.ai one last time for sponsoring this webinar. Everybody, please check them out. Skit.ai is the website. To those of you watching us live or watching a recording of this, thank you so much. It's always appreciated. If you are watching us live, we're back tomorrow with a webinar at 1 o'clock Eastern on debt buying. There's a link in the chat to register if you haven't done so, or you can find a link on the events calendar at accountrecovery.net. So hope to see you back for that tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thanks so much for being here, and we look forward to seeing everybody soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mike.
David.